Good afternoon. Today we'll be talking to you about why a GMO should be labeled, and I'm Gwen Kozak.
I'm Macy Glosser.
I'm Maggie Meyer.
And I'm Kate Hansen.
So, what are GMOs? GMO stands for genetically modified organisms. GMOs are living beings that have had their genetic code changed in some way. There's many types of GMO processes. One is crossbreeding. Crossbreeding is when you take two compatible crops and cross-pollinate them to produce a hybrid. For example, a plum and apricot. The next is mutagenesis. Mutagenesis is inducing genetic changes through radiation or chemicals. Protoplast fusion is when you take two plant cells which have their hard cell walls removed and you add a chemical called polyethylene. Polyploidy is introduced by soaking seeds in a chemical that can either make sterile crosses fertile, such as a hybrid of wheat and rye, or sterilizes crops, like watermelon, to make a seedless strain. Genome editing. This process has the ability to cut, replace, or insert genes within a seed cells using molecular scissors. Transgenesis is when genes from one crop are incorporated into another.
Currently, 64 countries have laws governing the labeling of GMO products. The United States should be no exception to that. Consumers have a right to know what they are putting into their bodies. Cigarettes, alcohol, products that contain allergens, and makeup are all required to carry some form of labeling to warn consumers about some aspect of the product. One solution that has been proposed for the GMO labeling conflict is the BE labeling law going into practice in 2020. BE stands for bioengineered foods. However, this does not cover all GMO processes. It does not label all GMO products, as some legislators have commented, and it does not require foods with two or less BE ingredients to be labeled. So for example, if you're shopping for a boxed product and it only contains two or less BE ingredients, they don't have to label that.
So our first chart shows the GMO growth through the years. This chart shows the GM variety in corn in the U.S. from 2000 to 2015. In 2015, it had nearly 4 times the amount of GM corn planted than in 2005. There have been many arguments over GMOs from the day that they were introduced to the agriculture community. They boosted the benefits of glyphosate-tolerant seeds, lowered food costs, and higher yields. However, with just like anything else, GMOs bring a list of concerns and risks. This has caused a culture of pro-GMO people and anti-GMO people. In the next few slides, we will examine some of the conflicts and concerns being used to support the GMO labeling debate. Many illnesses are becoming more common today, and this does not seem to be a coincidence. Research has found that pesticides and toxins in GMO food may still remain in the body after consumption. According to research compiled by the Institute for Responsible Technology, most GMOs are Roundup Ready. The active ingredient in Roundup is classified as a Class 2A carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. Our next graph is going to explore the relationship between GMOs and autism. Glyphosate is contained in Roundup, a pesticide sprayed on GMO fields. So this is our second graph that we created, and it talks about GMOs and autism. In 2000, 1 in every 150 boys were diagnosed with autism. At this time, the GMO use in the U.S. was very low. By 2008, when GMOs caught wildfire in the U.S., the autism diagnosis rose to 1 in every 88 boys. Currently, there are studies being done on the chemical glyphosate and its role in autism. Glyphosate, linked to high rates of autism, is a chemical used in Roundup, a product used on GMO fields to keep away any unwanted plant life.
Currently, there are also many environmental concerns surrounding GMO products. Just as the toxins and chemicals from GMOs can stay in the human body, they can also leak into the soil, which introduces chemicals and toxins to other crops and water systems. Cross-contamination typically occurs when pollen from a farmer's genetically modified crops is carried over to neighboring non-GMO fields. This is an increasing problem, as organic fields can actually be fined if they have any non-GMO products found to have grown in their fields. One way that GMOs seek to reduce pesticide use is by changing and modifying genes in food to make them resistant to certain insects. However, insects such as the western corn rootworm have evolved resistance to one of the genes that has been deployed against them. This is causing farmers to rely on pesticides, and in some cases they are using more pesticides that were used in the past. There are currently many more health-related and environmental studies being done on GMO products to determine their risks. GMOs are still a relatively new way of growing food, and naturally many people are concerned about the technique. We are years, perhaps even decades away from truly understanding what GMOs do to our bodies. In a society where we are starting to learn the consequences of bad eating habits, it is crucial to be informed about every product that we put into our bodies.
So now we'll talk about the consumer feelings and rights. In the next graph, we will be supporting some of these facts that we're going to talk about. So approximately 90% of the U.S. consumers support GMO labeling in the U.S. Consumer incomes are rising, suggesting that the need for cheap GMO products is not as great. There are also protests every year for GMO labeling laws. As you can see in the image below, there's quite a few people, and there's more and more protesting going on every day with more information on GMOs that are coming out. Next, the Consumer Bill of Rights is also a giant factor in all of this because the Consumer Bill of Rights has 8 basic consumer rights. 2 of those are the right to be informed and the right to choose. So, asking for labeling on GMOs is simply asking for consumer rights to be upheld.
So our third graph talks about the U.S. opinion on GMOs. A survey done by the Mellman Group supports the idea that customers want the right to label GMOs. This is a shocking number, and it shows that this is an issue that should be taken seriously. It is not unreasonable for people to want to be informed about their products and to be awarded the right to choose what they are purchasing. As you can see, we chose a bar graph because we wanted to show how much people favor the opinion on GMO labeling versus how they oppose it or don't know about it.
So in this chart, we see that the U.S. income and GMOs are being correlated. So in this, we see a variety of salary brackets. In this, we see that more GMO products are bought at a lower salary bracket, which is kind of to be expected. But it is interesting that in this graph it shows that even people at the higher end of the salary bracket are still purchasing GMO products. The whole point of GMOs in the US is that people want them to be labeled. I feel through this research that as long as the GMOs are labeled correctly, anyone in any salary bracket will be willing and able to buy these products.
So throughout this presentation, we have been arguing that consumers have a right to labeling and that GMOs should be labeled. Without proper labeling, we are violating 2 of the 8 rights in the Consumer Bill of Rights. All GMO products and ingredients should be labeled to increase the clarity given to consumers.
We live in a world full of choices. We live in a society where people want to know all their options and have the right to choose their own path. It should be no different when it comes to our food. We would not shop at a grocery store where our products were chosen for us, so why would we have to purchase food that is not labeled properly? Even with the BE labeling law going into practice in 2020, consumers will still not have all the information they should have.
So we brought in one of our classmates to sit in on our presentation to see if we could convince her. So did we convince you, Kate?
So after hearing your guys' arguments, I think that you did convince me. I think it's fair for all food products to be labeled by GMOs. The chart that was most convincing to me was the GMO and autism chart. I think you guys showed a great, strong correlation between the two, and it's very concerning that consumers are unaware of what they're putting in their bodies.
Yeah, that's interesting. The GMO and autism chart was actually one that I found incredibly interesting, but one of my favorites was the bar chart where we showed the U.S. opinion on GMO labeling. I found this to be the most influential in my opinion because it showed a great contrast between those who favored and those who opposed, and it showed that there was a larger amount that favored versus the very small amount that seems to oppose.
And it was also interesting how many people are unaware of what GMOs even are, and that's going with Kate's point, that's pretty scary that you're putting all these things in your body and you don't even know. Another one that was really influential to me was the image that we found from a protest, protesting the labeling of GMO foods, but they're protesting for it. As you can see in just that one picture, there were so many people, so many signs, because it is important. We are consuming these products every single day, and we don't even know what they're doing to us or for us.
Yeah, I find that incredibly interesting, especially since they're going to be doing so many more studies in the next 10 to 20 years, still trying to figure out exactly what GMOs do to our bodies, because we really don't have a full picture yet. And I think that's even more important when you're considering labeling, because if you don't really know what something's going to do to your body, you should know that you're consuming that type of product.
So thank you so much, Kate, for coming in today and listening to what we have to say.
I hope we convinced you too.